Evening, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us tonight for our October webinar. Well, we'll be talking about some tips and tricks and tools for building a bird club. Really glad to have you here with us on this beautiful fall evening. Before we get too far into things, I just want to cover a couple of quick Zoom housekeeping things. When I shared my screen, it probably went full screen for you. I'm going to recommend that you exit full screen, and this will just allow you to dock the chat window to the side of your screen. I will be several times throughout the night asking for your input, so would love for you to be able to see the chat window and share your ideas with me and with each other. So please, in that spirit, to make sure everyone can see what you're saying, make sure you switch the two from, it might say just host and panelist, to everyone. That way we can have a conversation with each other as we go along tonight. So I'm coming to you from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, where our mission is to interpret and conserve the Earth's biological diversity through research, education, and citizen science focused on birds. My name is Kelly Schaefer, and I work with the K-12 education team, where we create innovative resources and deliver transformative trainings that empower educators to build young people's science skills through birds, nature, participatory science, and inquiry. And I am joined today by Steph Somerville Zamora in the chat window. Steph will be sharing links and helping to field questions as we go along this evening. So feel free to flag Steph or I down in the chat if you have questions. The K-12 education team at the lab, we really think of our resources as falling along these three pillars: nature connection, participatory science, and inquiry investigations. So most of what you'll see from us, whether that's resources or trainings, is going to touch on one or really mostly multiple of these pillars. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about all of them because bird clubs lend themselves really well to exploring projects of a really wide variety. Just kind of depends on your setting and the youth that you're working with. So we're going to dive into that a little bit more as we go along here. But I just wanted to share with you some goals for this session. I want to talk about three key considerations for starting a new club. I want to go through some free resources and activities to support you and your bird club and your youth if they're new birders, and talk about different projects that you can implement as well. So let's dive right into those three key considerations for beginning a bird club. Now, I do kind of hate to say this, but when we talk to a lot of the educators that we work with about bird clubs and we ask, what do you absolutely need to do to make a successful bird club? What we hear is that there is no one way to set up a bird club. So I wish I could give you a magic formula, but there really isn't one because it's really going to depend on your setting, the age of the youth that you're working with, how often and how close together your meetings are going to be with them. So really, it's so highly subjective that there's not one magic formula, but there are three pieces of key advice that our educators who have run bird clubs have shared with us that I want to make sure we touch on tonight as we go along. So in a nutshell, those three key considerations are: consider your goals. Make sure that you have something that you are trying to achieve as you're planning your bird club. This will really help you frame conversations about what your bird club is and what it will do and what you hope to achieve with it. The next is think ahead about challenges that you might encounter and be prepared to meet them head on. And the third is pick a project or a theme to build around. So once you've got those goals and you've got the buy-in from leadership and the okay to go ahead and lead your bird club, one of the things you'll want to do is make sure that you have some project or theme that supports those goals and really will help you structure your club. So let's start out by throwing this question out to you. Why start a bird club at all? What are some goals that you might have for a bird club that you start? Please feel free to share those ideas in the chat window. And maybe as we go along, I'll be able to point out resources that will support those goals too. Laura is saying building nature connection to a place. Sandra's saying helping students identify local birds. Barbara's saying to get kids outside more with a focus. I love that idea of using a bird club as a focus for being outdoors. All right, so oh my gosh, so many great things are coming into the chat window now, but I'm seeing a lot of just getting outside and being in nature as a really strong theme people are interested in achieving. Building an interest in birds as another one. Let's see, what other themes are popping out? I'm seeing ideas about observation too, just noticing the world around you, getting people to stop and listen, engaging your community and outdoor spaces. I'm also seeing this sentiment of building a relationship with the outdoors and maybe eventually with the goal of protecting it. Offering new projects to keep things fresh for clubs. Oh, I'm seeing this idea of a transdisciplinary projects. So bird clubs could be a great place to do project-based learning, right? Where you can pull in concepts and ideas from all sorts of different disciplines. I love this. So many great things. I'm also seeing this idea of doing science and authentic science. Love it. Yes, so those are wonderful goals for a bird club. And one of the nice things about a club setting, whether it's out of school time, an out of school organization club, or an after school club, your teacher, maybe we've had teachers who do a bird club before school with their students as well. There's maybe a little bit more freedom to structure things how you want. So it can open the door to all of these things that you're talking about, depending on how you set things up. So a lot of those things that you mentioned are goals that we hear commonly when we talk to educators about bird clubs. That nature connection piece, sharing your passion for birds, and developing science and life skills. So one of the cool things about bird clubs is they're a great place for collaboration among youth of all different ages, and they can help us build communication skills as well as developing these science skills and this passion for birds and nature. Awesome. Okay, so we've got an idea of why we want to do. Oh, you lost audio. Shoot. Okay, hang on. Okay, it looks like I'm back. Thanks, Steph. So not sure where you lost audio. Apologies for that, but I was just wrapping up and saying that bird clubs can be a really wonderful place to achieve all of those goals. Now that we have those goals in mind, we can think about how we might face challenges that arise. So think about your particular setting or the time of day or anything about where you think you might be able to set up your bird club. What are some challenges you anticipate you might run into? How to recruit youth. That would be one I would love to hear feedback from other educators. If you've are in the chat and you've done a bird club before, maybe you can share some ideas. How do you go about recruiting youth? Some other things I'm seeing come up are you might not have great habitat in your area. You might not have a lot of equipment. You might have difficulty getting buy-in from school leaders and parents. Time of day, yeah, so it might not be ideal for birding. That's a great one. We can talk a little bit about that as we go on, and if I forget to address it, definitely flag it for me again. So yeah, if you might be competing with recess, you might be competing with traffic, the time of day that you're doing it too, so you might just have noise. Folks are also bringing up just you might not be in the best habitat for birding. And yeah, what if you run into bad weather during your meeting and your whole plan gets kind of blown? Yeah, those are those are definite challenges for sure. And if you're trying to get somewhere, how do you secure transportation? Yeah, so that is something we hear about a lot, those challenges as well. So common challenges put into really tiny buckets that or sorry, really big buckets, I should say, that we hear about have to do with funding. So if you do not have great bird habitat around you and you want to go somewhere, you might need to secure funding to do that and pay for buses. And how do you organize that? Um, or if you have a project that you want to do, you want to feed birds, how do you go about securing funding to do that as well? What about buy-in from leadership? So you want to feed birds, it might create a mess, or you need somebody to support the club from the beginning and you have to sell it to them. And then this idea of limited access to the outdoors. So these are some really common things we hear as well. So I'll touch briefly on a couple of these challenges, and as I go through the activities and resources later, I'll try and come back to them as well. So some strategies that teachers have shared with us that they've used for dealing with funding challenges. Well, first of all, to take advantage of as many free resources as they can. So the Cornell Lab has a lot of free educational resources, and you can absolutely teach birds and about birds in a really low cost way. You don't have to have binoculars to observe birds. You don't have to feed birds. There are lots of things that you can do that are free or very low cost. So if you know funding is going to be a real challenge, you might have to choose to go some of those avenues and work around it in that way. Other educators have shared that they've found really great partners in parent groups. So if you happen to have a kid who's really into birds with enthusiastic parents, they can be great champions. So that is one of the pieces of advice that we've gotten is look for champions in your parents and community. So who will be enthusiastic and help support and preach the gospel. Another is seeking donations from local stores. So what I mean by that is we've had some teachers who've shared that they've had success approaching local stores about things like bird seed. So some of them might have bags of seed that they can't sell because they have a hole or they're ripped or in some other way damaged, and they might be willing to give you those bags of seed for free or a reduced cost. So it doesn't hurt to go into these stores and ask about those sorts of things. It can also be really great promotion for these stores. So sometimes you'll find local stores who are excited about supporting a school and things like those. Especially if you're willing to maybe write them a social media post or something. So there are opportunities to create relationships with local stores and see if they have product that they can't sell at full price that you might be able to get at a discount. So there are options like that. There's also things like Donors Choose, which are online things. And there might be local nature centers or Audubon societies that it would be worth connecting with as well to see if they have any advice or ability to support you. And I see that in the chat window, we have a suggestion to check with your local Audubon Society as well. So Kathy's saying that she works with her local society, Audubon Society, as an educator and is able to bring binoculars and other materials to help lead the clubs. So that's amazing. And Michelle is saying that she did an Amazon teacher wish list and got birdseed and feeders. So those are all fantastic ideas as well. Patty is mentioning check grants from local utilities as well. Not heard of that, but you were able to get a grant for binoculars, which is amazing. We actually have a binocular grant open right now ourselves. It closes on the 20th, so this weekend is your last chance to apply. So we hope to be able to do this grant next year. It'll depend a little bit on sponsorships and things like that, but there are grants out there that are worth checking out and looking for. Okay. So some strategies that teachers have shared they've had success for when looking for leadership support are have to do with sharing your goals, right? So one of the fundamental things we say about having a bird club is make sure you have some goals. Well, if you have strong goals, that might be a way to help sell your leadership on the idea of a club. So what skills are you hoping members will bring, will be building? What educational standards might you be meeting? Think about ways that you can really emphasize the benefits to your students, including there's lots of fantastic resources out there about the benefits of outdoor learning for youth. So I share often these infographics from the Children and Nature Network, which have really awesome infographics about the benefits of outdoor learning. That could be a great place to start to share with leadership. And another powerful way to help secure leadership we've heard from educators is if they have that champion parent that I mentioned before, showing school leadership that you already have buy-in from your community can be a really powerful way as well. Here are some of those infographics I mentioned and these little nuggets of great information about the benefits of outdoor learning that you can share with administration. Things about boosting academic performance, enhancing intention, improving behavior, all of these amazing things. I won't go into this in depth, but you can learn more and find these on childrenandnature.org. Okay, so the third point was picking a project or a theme to support the structure of your club. And the biggest thing that we heard from educators when it came to this idea of picking a project or a theme was to, as much as possible, involve your club members in choosing these projects or themes that you will explore. So you have your goals and you've got buy-in from leadership and you're ready to roll. Think about some projects or themes that would support meeting those goals. Provide your youth, depending on the age, with some options and let them help shape the club so they have that sense of ownership. This is a quote from here from Barbara Jacobs Smith, who is a former third grade teacher and bird club leader, and she shared some wisdom about her experience leading clubs. And she says, make sure that kids are actively involved in the club from the beginning. Let them give it a snappy title. Include kids when establishing the initial goals, rules, and expectations of the club. What do the students want to learn? What would they like to do? And so this can help with that enthusiasm and the buy-in from your students and help with the longevity of the club as well. And this is a quote from a high school educator who has done a high school ornithology class, Jeff. And one of the things I love about Jeff is he's not afraid to have his students do activities that might seem young in some ways. So we have this build a nest activity, for example, and I've done it with young students, but he's done it with his high school students, and he made it, age appropriate, added challenges to the nest building activity, but also he just embraces this idea that if you share your enthusiasm, your students will, be willing to play along with you. But another thing that he does is he frames it as something that is important and useful for students. So he gets buy-in from his students by helping them see that the work that they're doing through their bird club and through their ornithology class can actually help birds and help the world. So Jeff says that young people are very anxious about the future of the planet, but don't see much of a way to make a difference. I show them that their contributions to citizen, or what you'll hear us call participatory science, is a way to start that process. I link the birding we are doing, especially arrival and departure or absence of species, with the fact that they can be indicators of climate change. We have looked at the 2014 State of the Birds report to see if were mentioned species in our area that we could pay attention to. They take great pride and satisfaction in adding pieces of the puzzle if they think it reveals some information that is useful. So that is something that bird clubs can do really well, is provide students with an opportunity to feel like they are affecting their world. And we'll talk about participatory science and how that can boost that and really be an effective way to feel like you are actually not feel like to actually contribute to our understanding of the world around us and help birds. But yeah, so depending on the age group of the kids you're working with, this can be something that you strive to highlight, this idea that you're helping the birds that are around you. And I mean, all kids find this to be motivating, but with older kids where there's sometimes that too cool for school factor, this can be particularly motivating. So let's dive into three free resources that we have here at the Lab of O that will help support these different projects and themes that you can dive into. So I want to start by looking at nature connection, which was, I feel like, the strongest theme that came out in the chat window when you shared things that you were interested in doing. So we have a ton of resources available that really support nature connection. So one of the things that I like to do when working with youth and getting them excited about birds is actually starting with just building observation skills and spending time outdoors doing that. So just having that time outside and building your observation skills can be a really powerful way to begin building those nature connections and that sense of place. And so one of the things that I think is really great as part of a bird club is nature journaling, because it gets kids outside in nature, helps them develop that sense of place while creating this culture of curiosity, and building some critical thinking and creativity skills. You can even build in science practice and observation skills into this. And nature journaling can be like pretty inherently interdisciplinary because you can include writing, you can include drawing, you can include prompts that students, can explore creatively. And it provides this really great opportunity to combine structured learning and private reflection time. And what's great about a bird club is it's something that you're meeting multiple times. So you can build this practice into your meetings, and you can even tie it to special locations. So we like to call these, oh, sorry. First, there's lots of resources out there to help support teaching nature journaling. So if that's something you think you might want to do with your students, John Muir Laws has some great free teacher resources that you can explore. But one of the things we like to talk about with nature journaling is having these special spots that students can return to time and time again, and we call those sit spots. So this idea is that students choose a personal sit spot, so a specific location around the schoolyard that they can return to over time. And this over time piece is where the magic really happens because students get to make these really meaningful observations and notice seasonal changes as they visit the same spot over and over again. They start to feel a real strong connection to that spot and a sense of ownership of to that and maybe ownership is the wrong word, but they really do feel a sense of connection to that spot. They learn to, while they're there visiting the spot over and over again, make better and more detailed observations over time. And sit spots can be a great place to observe phenology, which is, the changes that happen seasonally. And that can be a fun thing to explore in your bird club as well. When do you see the flowers start to bloom? When do you see certain types of birds? You can tie in your observations of a changing habitat to your observations of your changing bird species that happen, during migration or once winter settles in and you're back to your resident birds. If you're interested in learning more about sit spots and ways to embrace this as part of your practice, we have our Spark guide, so Spark Student Curiosity through Outdoor Exploration, which has lots of outdoor teaching tips, but also has these great activity starters for sit spots. So things like prompts like, I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of. So frameworks for thinking about things that you're observing, or a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 observation where you look for 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can smell, 2 things you can feel, 1 thing that it makes you feel, things like that. Um, so all sorts of great prompts are built into that guide as well. But I definitely encourage you to consider sit spots and consider phenology because these repeated visits over time can be really powerful ways to build that sense of connection to place. Another great resource for you is our Explorer's Guidebook. This is available as a free download from our website. They can be filled out independently or with guidance from an educator. They have some of my favorite observation activities in it, particularly a sound map. If you haven't done a sound map before, I highly recommend it. Very simple activity where you can just do it with a piece of blank paper as well. So if you draw a little X in the spot in the center, which represents where you're standing, and then you challenge your students to map the sounds that they hear around them. So distance and location, and finding ways to represent what they're hearing, words, drawing, symbols. Um, and it's such a great way to maybe tune out the visual overstimulation and tune into a sense that we don't always pay as much attention to. And that sense of sound is so useful for learning about birds as well, right? Because birds have their songs and calls, and we can identify species by them. So it's such a great way to build up even into these bird ID basics that you might be interested in. Again, this is available as a free download from our website, and Steph is sharing the links to all of these in the chat window as well. And I'll be sure to send out a follow-up email, which will have a link to the recording and all of the links that we are sharing tonight as well. All right, so one of the challenges that we talked about is access to the outdoors, and I didn't really dive into that in the challenge section, but I want to dive into it now. It can be very difficult to access the outdoors all the time. You might just have weather challenges, or you might not have a lot of green space around you. And maybe you can walk to a park sometimes, and maybe you can't. So there are ways that you can bring nature inside. And one of my favorite ways to do that is through bird or wildlife cams. So these bring nature right to you. And here at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, we have a few different types of cams. We have feeder cams. So we have a fruit feeder in Panama. We've got a seed feeder here in Ithaca. And in the wintertime, we have one in Ontario. We've got nesting bird cams of all sorts of different kinds, seabirds like cahals and albatross, raptors like osprey and owls. And these can be really powerful and intimate ways to get a glimpse into the life of birds. You can explore their life cycles, you can observe their behavior, you can even practice bird ID skills. Um, actually, let's pop over real quick to the website. Is everybody seeing the BirdCam website here? I want to just make sure I shared my screen properly. Oh, I see we've got some cam fans in the chat window. That always makes me happy. Yeah, the cams are pretty fantastic. I want to see if I've remembered to share sound. So if you come to bird cams and you go to live cams here, you'll be able to scroll down and see all of our cams. This time of year, we have fewer cams in operation because breeding season is over. So during breeding season, you'll see a lot more going on. You'll see California condors, the great horned owls, the manakins. Um, but we also have these feeder cams I mentioned, which are going year round. Um, so right now, if you were to click on our Ithaca feeder cam, you can look at it at night and sometimes really cool things happen, but you can even scroll back through the day and get a glimpse at what was happening previously. And if you scroll down, each cam has highlights. So say you wanted to work on bird ID with your students, but you're not able to go outside today. What you could do is have the live cam up and practice some observations that way. Or you could pull one of these clips. And I find this to be pretty useful because as an educator, I can watch this clip and I can go ahead and observe the birds that are going to be here and write down a list of birds that are going to be visible. So if we practice our ID skills, I know what our students are going to be identifying. You can hear some angry squirrels there as well. So these clips can be a really useful tool as well for teaching identification and things like that. So love the bird cams, great tool to use to bring nature to you. We also have another Spark guide. So these guides are kind of just, not just, but they are essentially quick guides to picking up and using these educational tools. This Spark guide doesn't feature just bird cams. It talks about how to use all wildlife cams and provides an activity that you can do with them. So definitely that's available on our website for free. So definitely check those out. Another thing that came out in our discussion was sharing a love of birds with students. So we have a lot of things that can help with bird ID. The Explorer's Guidebook, which I mentioned earlier, gets into bird ID as well. And then we also have lots of cool free resources like the Merlin Bird ID app. I'm guessing a lot of folks in the chat window are probably pretty familiar with this app. I feel like just in the last like 3 or 4 years, I notice people bringing it up a lot more. I actually saw it on a YouTube short the other day. Somebody was making jokes about, how old are you? Are you like excited to have a new dishwasher old? Are you excited to hear learn the birds you're hearing old, like with Merlin. It totally floored me just to hear it out in like culture like that. So anyway, Merlin Bird ID app is a free app that apparently older folks like to use to get to know birds, but younger kids like to use it too because it is an incredibly intuitive app. And it has four different ways that can help you identify birds. So step-by-step ID, which is answering 5 simple questions about a bird you're seeing. It will help you identify that bird. It has sound ID, which is basically Shazam for bird song. Photo ID, if you're lucky enough to get a picture on your cell phone cam, it can help you identify the bird as well. And then down here, you'll see Explore, and that is basically like a field guide, but you can actually manipulate it to show likely birds, so you'll know what you're likely to see on that day. So really useful tool for teaching bird ID, really intuitive for kids to look. You can see here just how easy this interface is, and kids are so intuitive with technology these days that they can pretty much pick it up and use it. And you can use Merlin as a great tool to set up fun activities. So you can use the Merlin Likely Birds function to create a list of 9 local birds and have students create their own bird bingo card. So create a 3x3 grid, have them draw the birds that they expect to see so they will practice getting to know what they look like, and then go outside and play bird bingo. This is actually a blog on our website. It'll walk you through how to do the likely birds in Merlin. And it's a super fun activity. A lot of great opportunities for getting kids excited about their local birds. Another thing we like to do that combines art and getting to know birds is you can make your own field guide, which is a really great project for a bird club. So if you assign each student a bird, their focus bird, and they become an expert on that bird, you can have them create essentially a field guide page for that bird. Draw the bird, write the name of it on the front, write some cool facts about it, note field marks. So those are things that you'll be able to see out in the field that will help you identify the bird. Listen to the song, describe it, write it down. And if you have time and space, you can even include some cool natural history facts about it as well. So Steph can share a link to that blog post about the Merlin app, or excuse me, the bird bingo card using Merlin in the chat window. But yeah, so I will also share another resource that's free that has both the bird bingo and the field guide in it here in a moment. All right, so participatory science is another awesome thing that bird clubs are really well suited for. You might remember that Jeff, in his quote about getting high school students motivated to learn about birds, participatory science or citizen science was something that he mentioned. And this is something that is a real strength of the lab and that we have a lot of great resources to support. So let's just take a moment here and discuss what participatory science is. So I want to throw this out to you. Have you heard the term participatory science or citizen science or community science before? If you have, what are some key words that come to mind, or a definition, or even some projects that you think of? Happy saying people anywhere contributing to scientific data. Michelle's mentioning some projects like the Phenology Network or Feeder Watch. Jennifer is mentioning the Great Backyard Bird Count. Lisa's mentioning BioBlitz events. Those are great participatory science events for sure. Christmas bird counts, absolutely. Journey North is another great one. A lot of folks with great projects here. And yeah, so kind of the heart of these projects is all the same, and Kathy captured it pretty well. People everywhere who aren't professional scientists like you, me, and our students going outside, making observations of the natural world, and sharing those observations. So using basic scientific protocols, making observations, and reporting those observations to databases that scientists can then use to answer real-world questions. And I love this image to represent participatory science because it does such a great job of capturing the scope. It can be all online or all outside or anywhere in between on the scale of the microscopic to the scale of stars in the universe, from totally global to totally local and everywhere in between. So there are, whatever your students are into, if it isn't birds, if it's plants, if it's bugs, if it's stars, there are citizen science projects and participatory science projects out there for you. Here at the lab, we really do view participatory science as projects in which volunteers partner with professional scientists. So it really is a partnership that helps us answer these real world questions. And this is really important for students because they know that their data really matters. It answers that essential question of why are we doing this? Well, we're doing it because the data that you collect and the observations that you make are being used by scientists to help conserve and protect and understand birds. So it answers that essential question. It can be super motivating. The Cornell Lab of Ornithology has four main participatory science projects at the moment. And they all follow similar pathways: getting outside and observing birds, collecting data, entering that data online, and then you can also retrieve and view the data that you share online as well. And I'm going to highlight three of the projects for us tonight. First, I want to focus on Project Feeder Watch, because this is a really great way to involve youth and in bird clubs because it can be such a cool way to get to know your local birds. So this is a program that runs November to April, and it allows you to track your local bird sightings while contributing to this continent-wide data set. So basically you watch birds. They like to try and do it on 2 consecutive days if possible, 15 minutes a piece at a feeder area. And it doesn't have to be necessarily a seed feeder. It could be if you have a habitat that has berry bushes, things like that, you can do that as well. And what's cool about using bird feeders for bird observations is that it brings the birds right to you. So there's definitely a cost associated with bird feeding, right? You have to have feeders, you have to have seed. What you don't necessarily have to have is binoculars because the feeders bring the birds right to you. So that's a big advantage. And you don't even necessarily have to purchase feeders, you can make them. So we've got resources that tell you how to make different feeders, and we have a guide that goes through how to engineer a feeder as well. So there are lots of opportunities to bring the birds right to you. I'm gonna rush ahead to Nest Watch because we are running a little low on time and I want to make sure we get to talk about this one. This is a great one for the summer months if you're doing a bird club as part of summer camp or something like that. This is a great one to do where you get to help scientists study the breeding biology of birds by observing nests. And what's really great about this project for clubs is you have the opportunity to actually create something together. So you can build your own nest boxes. So Nest Watch is really great because you are supporting local birds by providing nesting habitats. So cavity nesters, or birds that nest in holes in trees and things like that. One of the biggest limiting factors for them is nesting sites. There's just fewer dead trees around because of the way that we manage our landscapes. You don't want a dead tree near your house, you cut it down. That limits the number of nesting sites available for birds. So having nest boxes can actually be a really powerful way to help your local birds. And Nest Watch provides you with all these amazing plans to help you build really safe and effective nest boxes and nest platforms. So there's a feature on the Nest Watch website called Right Bird, Right House under the Learn tab that you can select your region, you can select your habitat. So you'll see I have Northeast and Town selected here. And it came up with 13 different nest box plans, excuse me. You'll see that they are rated by stars for difficulty, and you can see here that the Robin says it's a kid-friendly one. So you can make plans that way as well. You can kind of choose your kid-friendly plans. And then you can build these nest platforms together, put them out, and observe the birds that use them. And it can be a really great avenue for opening up a whole project for your school habitat. What else could you do to improve your schoolyard habitat? So it's a really great window or doorway into thinking about how you can improve your habitat. And feeder watch can be too, because there's lots of native plants that you could plant that would support feeding birds as well. We also have the Nest Watch team put together a free downloadable curriculum that they created in conjunction with New York State 4-H called Thinking Outside of the Nest Box that provides lots of great lessons and activities to support using Feeder Watch in an educational setting. So definitely worth downloading and checking out there as well. All right, now we're going to dive a little bit into eBird. And eBird's motto is that every bird counts. So eBird is a year-round participatory science project. So you can do it any time of year and you can do it anywhere at all in the world. And all you need to do is record the birds that you see or hear during a particular time period and share that. And then you're a participatory scientist. So essentially the data that you want to collect while you're out there is you want to know where did you bird, so the location on a map. You want to know the date and effort, so the day you were out there, what type of observation you were doing. Were you standing still or a stationary count? Were you walking on a trail? So that would be a traveling count. How long were you out there? How far did you travel? And what did you see or hear? And that is your bird count for eBird. You can share that information on the website so you could keep track on a paper checklist, or if you have access to mobile technology, the app is really useful because it will track time, location, and distance for you. So it makes it really easy. And it also interfaces with Merlin so that if you are typing in a bird and you're like, is that really what I saw? You can click on the bird and then click on the Merlin icon and it will open the Merlin Bird ID app for you and you can see the image of the bird and double check your ID if you would like to. So that's a cool feature as well. So this project is really great because again, it's low cost, it's free to participate. You don't necessarily need binoculars to do it, and it's year round. We have a new resource out there if you are interested in diving into eBird. This is called eBird Explorer. So we have a whole eBird Explorer suite. And we have 4 classroom-based kits. This is an out-of-school time leader's guide. So this is designed for out-of-school time settings. It does still require some sharing of slides and things like that, but it is designed to be more part of a youth development sort of program. So it was developed in conjunction with New York State 4-H and the New York State Network for Youth Success, which is an after-school network. So it has 11 different lessons that are 1 hour long. It has indoor and outdoor components. It focuses a little more on building connections with youth and the leader. So each section has a welcome and connection beginning, and then we have three main goal areas for this leader's guide: so building some positive youth development, helping youth view themselves as scientists, and building nature connection and bird ID skills. So here are those 11 different lessons and the different goals that we have to meet and where you can meet those along the continuum. So one of the things I wanted to point out is that one of the things that we really wanted to do for Youth Action for Birds is help students view themselves as scientists. So we have this first lesson, which is really dedicated to this idea of who are scientists and helping students realize that anybody can be a scientist. And this is actually just recently available as a free download. So I just wanted to make sure that you knew it was out there. And I want to highlight a couple things for you. So this is that first lesson, who are scientists? So it has some scientist reports on a diverse array of young scientists who are doing really cool work in natural settings. We have and then we introduce youth to participatory science as well. We are in the process of actually developing a new participatory science video that will complement this lesson guide as well as eBird. So I'm really excited for that to come out. That'll be released around the end of this year, which will introduce the concept of participatory science to youth. And then we get into building observation skills with just some fun outdoor activities, the sound map, which I mentioned before. And then lessons 3 through 7 get into the meat of building bird ID skills. And so it has the bird bingo that I mentioned in it, as well as the local field guide that I mentioned in it. So if those are activities you're interested in and you'd like to see like a meaty write-up of how to do that, this is a great resource to download. And then we get into habitats and adaptations and build on that towards this local action project that youth can do. So if you are interested in teaching bird ID and nature connection and you want to lead to a project that your students will help design and implement, this lesson guide will really help you do that. So encourage you to check it out. It does a really great job of helping youth see that they can do things that help support their local birds. So you'll see here pictured the 7 simple actions to help birds. And you'll notice that one of the things mentioned is doing citizen science. And so another thing that we talked about is improving your local habitat with native plants. So all of these things that you can get your students excited about in Bird Club can be used to make these awesome projects that provide youth with a lot of excitement and ownership and empowerment to feel like they can affect change. Because one of the things I wanted to do when I was writing this lesson guide is if you talk to youth today, and I used to work in an environmentally focused high school, and similar to that quote that Jeff said, there's a lot of anxiety around the state of this world and this lot of just this. Have you heard of the term eco grief? This feeling of things are so bad and there's nothing I can do. And so one of the things that we can do in bird clubs is say that's not necessarily true. Like working together in a club setting like this, we can do something for our local birds, whether that's participatory science, whether that is improving our school habitat or community park. There are things that we can do, and little actions can have big impacts. So that is this Youth Action for Birds lesson guide in a nutshell. Really excited that it's out there for everybody now. But I also wanted to talk about one more aspect of things that bird clubs are really fantastic for. Because you've got this group of students that are working closely together, they have shared goals, You have multiple meetings with them. It's a really awesome time to do inquiry. And we have our students as scientist curricula, which are grade banded K-5 and 6 through 12. And this is more classroomy, I will say. It really is designed for a classroom setting, but that doesn't mean that you can't do inquiry projects or use it to help you scaffold them. So what Students as Scientists does incredibly well is that it helps scaffold this whole process of designing and implementing your own student-led investigations. And if you are in a club setting and you don't want it to feel too classroomy, you as an educator can pull a lot of things from this and adapt it to the club setting. And I wanted to share with you one project that one of the educators that we work with actually on this, Jody worked with us on this, did with her own bird club. So they did an inquiry project around suet, which is a type of bird food that is favored by things like woodpeckers. And it's, seeds and berries and nuts encased in often animal fat that really, I mean, woodpeckers go gaga for. And so this bird club decided that they wanted to figure out what birds would prefer, homemade suet or store-bought suet. And so this early bird club was a morning club, so before school, and it had K through fourth grade students. And so they made their own suet and they hung it out with store-bought suet, and they chose to use weight as their measure. So they weighed the cakes as at different meetings, and then used that to determine, which one was being eaten more. So they didn't even have to like know birds to identify them. They were just looking at the amount of food eaten as a way to measure the preference for different store-bought or homemade suet cakes. And as you can see here, the homemade cake went through 3 different cakes. So they found that their homemade cake was vastly preferred by their local birds versus the store-bought cake. So this was a really just fun experiment for them to do, building a lot of skills, but also um, getting kind of that sense of pride in their work and seeing that their homemade cake was vastly preferred by their local birds. Of course, you could always ask the question about, was it all birds or was it squirrels? But that's the fun about science, right? There's always new questions to ask and new avenues to explore. So that is some ways that you can support um, science learning, outdoor nature connection in your bird clubs. Hopefully you were able to share ideas in the chat window as well. I was really grateful for folks who shared their observations about ways that they had received support and funding as well. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your ideas in the chat window. Does anybody have any questions about what we discussed, or did I miss any questions about um, how to set them up? I know we had a question about recruitment, and if anybody has anything to add to that in the chat window, that would be great. Oh, hi, Phil. Phil's asking about the recipe for the suet. And yes, we do have the recipe. I actually believe that that experiment is a case study in one of the Students as Scientists, um, probably the K-5 curriculum, and uh, I believe that the recipe was included in that. If it's not in there, it's in one of the Bird Sleuth Investigators, and I can find it for you. All right. Well, if you have questions, please feel free to share them in the chat window. I want to thank you again for joining us. If you would like a letter for one contact hour, you can send us an email at k12lab@cornell.edu. And Oh my gosh, Steph, I forgot to update this last slide again. Steph would like me to point out we don't do Twitter anymore. We're on Instagram. So we're on Facebook and Instagram these days. You can find us there. You can always email us at k12lab@cornell.edu. And if you do end up starting a bird club, let us know how it goes. We love to hear. Oh, Barbara's sharing that your local DOAS. I'm not familiar with that acronym. Could you elaborate there? They donated 8 binoculars to her class slash school for a birding project. Um, Delaware Otsego Audubon. Thank you, Barbara. And really liked the book on Meadowview Street, which is a really great book. So feel free to keep asking questions in the chat window. I'll be hanging out for a few more minutes. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining us for tonight's webinar. We hope to see you at a future webinar. Good luck, happy birding, enjoy your bird club.